Welcome to the Resolve Kitchen Table Conversations, a new digital series with a nostalgic nod to the founding of Resolve around Barbara Eck's kitchen table. Ms. Eck founded the first Resolve support group in 1974, where she brought women together to discuss issues that matter to them. I'm so proud to be here with this incredible panel to help continue to carry out this conversation and this tradition. And we're going to dive into some topics that are really important to those who are challenged in building a family. It's going to be real people having real conversations. And the topic of this kitchen table conversation is the many perspectives of living child-free. And even that title is going to be up for discussion. And it is sponsored by our friends at Granada Bio. So thank you. And we have so much to discuss. So again, I'm Tracey Wilson. I'll be your moderator. And I started my relationship with Resolve in about 2016. I was the co-chair of the New York State and the Tri-State Area Walk of Hope. And I found Resolve, or I should say they found me after a video that I made went what I call infertility viral. And it also told me a lot about where people are struggling and how and why. And I've also been privileged to be the host of the Resolve Night of Gala, which is the Night of Hope, which is the annual fundraising gala. And so that Night of Hope is important and exciting, and I've been thrilled to be a part of it. I'm also the very best Aunt Honey, is how I like to describe myself, as Aunt Honey. But let's meet these amazing panelists. And Jobi, I'm going to start with you. If you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and also what you like to be called and you prefer to be called, child-free, childless, what language that you like to learn, what language you like to say, to speak around this important topic.
Okay. Hi, my name is Jobi Tyson, and I am the founder of Tutum Global, a multimedia platform for childless women, and also just recently launched Tutum Journal, which is a digital publication for childless women. And some years ago, I had a 20-year infertility journey that was unexplained, and it ended actually through a hysterectomy, and that's how I started with my research journey to really find out the root cause of it, and it was endometriosis and adenomyosis. And so from there, I wrote a blog and it went viral, and I inadvertently became a leader in this space because women around the world started reaching out to me, and I knew something more had to be done. And so that's how Tutum Global was founded. And as far as child-free versus childless, it's really up to the person. It's childless women, child-free women aren't monolithic. So it really just depends on what they prefer to be called. It used to be a time where childless was just childless not by choice, and child-free was childless by choice. But now women get to decide, have been deciding what they want to be called. So it's really up to the person. I call myself childless, and my network is called at Childless Women, my social handles. So that's just where I am right now, but I definitely respect whatever woman wants to be called.
Yeah, I think that's, first of all, thank you. And it's amazing to have you here. And I think it really is important to figure out what our own language around that is, because I think sometimes child-free, depending on who says it and how, or childless, sometimes I feel like when I say things, I don't actually use any of the words like that right now. I usually say like, oh, we wanted kids, but that didn't work out. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how I say it when people mm-hmm. ask. Because I don't know what words resonate with me yet. And for me, sometimes if I say child-free, I feel like it almost doesn't honor that I wanted them and don't have them. And if I say childless, it makes it sound like I'm not thriving. So like, I haven't figured out for me what language works best. And I really appreciate you being here and like helping us to lead these discussions. And your website is phenomenal. So anyone who is watching, these three women on this panel all have incredible resources that women and men might find really important, and anyone who's working on their infertility journey. So thank you so much for being here. And Justine, let's head on over to you.
Thank you. So I'm Justine Froelker, and I'm a author, speaker, corporate trainer. I'm certified in the work of Dr. Brene Brown, and so that's what I teach. I'm a therapist by trade. So I've been in some capacity of traditional mental health for over 21 years. And ended well, we're at 9 years ago. Our journey ended 9 years ago. So I'm well into the lifelong journey of healing. And I think I found resolve probably through Instagram. And I remember I did a video too about how I'm still a mother.
Yes.
Learning, like I learned motherhood lessons through the journey of grief and loss of infertility. And so for me, I actually did not have this really long journey of infertility treatments. And for sometimes that's one of my shame triggers in our community. I didn't go through years of treatments and things like that. I had a physical limitation. I had 2 back surgeries in high school. I spent a year of my life in a body cast. It was never super recommended that I carry a pregnancy. So we did gestational surrogacy. We lost 3 babies. They were embryos, and to us, they count, and they were our children. And so I've never tried to be pregnant. I've never been pregnant. My surrogate never got pregnant. And all I have is, well, 3 little embryos right there. And they are my children, and they would be 9 this year. And for me, I think I agree with Jobi. It depends on the couple, the journey, where you're at, whether or not you're going to call yourself child-free, childless. I agree, Tracey, that there's this element of, for me, like child-free doesn't really honor the journey, the whole part of the journey. And childless it almost makes me feel like I'm identified by the wound, and I don't want to be the wound. I'm going to be a scar. I'm a scar. I don't want to share, but I think that's a big problem in our community, is that we keep sharing from the open wounds versus our healed scars. And so I often just kind of say, like, we tried really hard to have kids. It didn't work out. So we try to create other ways to create parenthood. And I mother in a lot of different ways because that's still my value, my core value, even if it didn't work out in the traditional sense of motherhood and biological children here by my side. And so I think it depends on the person. But I still I lean towards, like Jobi, like childless. I'm childless, not by choice, and I work to be a mother in different ways.
Well, I thank you for sharing that story, and I know how difficult it can be. And I also appreciate you speaking about the shame trigger, as you say, and I know Brene Brown's work is amazing, and I know you do incredible work about this idea that, like, because this is similar to me, like I wasn't medically available for IVF. That wasn't I was also not probably ever going to carry a child, and it wasn't recommended. And I've had a lot of illness in my life. And I do sometimes feel like this eyeballs on me that, like, oh, well, if you didn't do IVF, then you really didn't want it that badly. You didn't really try everything. You didn't really, and I'm like, please know that if that were available to me, like I would have tried that, but it wasn't. And I do sometimes feel a little shame. It almost like, it's very weird, almost a little jealousy that I'm like, oh, I don't have the story about giving myself shots, or I don't have like, there can be some shame triggers about that, about the importance of honoring our own stories, and that we know that we did what we could and was best emotionally, physically, financially for each one of us. Exactly. And that's our own stories to honor. So thank you for sharing that. And Katy, you're up.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katy DeJong. I'm a sex educator, and I specifically right now work with folks who've experienced infertility, either sort of actively dealing with infertility, or in my case, in these women's cases, child-free, childless after infertility. Mm-hmm. And how that experience of infertility really impacts our sexuality. So that's the work I do. Mm-hmm. And the way I came to that is very much like a full circle situation, although it wasn't intended that way. But we've been now 6-ish years out from deciding to not pursue any more treatments. Mm-hmm. And after that, I decided to go back to school, and I studied philosophy, not really knowing where it was going to take me, but just sort of wanting to follow this path and do this thing. And along the way, I stumbled into a philosophy of sex and love class, and it just totally blew my world right open. And I could see and piece together sort of in retrospect how much the experience of infertility had kind of fractured pieces of my sexuality and my body image and my value as a woman and my femininity. And so yeah, I sort of like pieced these things back together through this process, and then came out the other side and went, well, there's no one talking about the impacts of sexuality and, you know, the relational issues and body image and how that all fits together, specifically in relation to infertility. So I thought, well, I guess I'm going to do that. so that's what I'm doing. Yeah.
Well, I can't thank you enough for being here. Your work is incredible. And really, what more powerful way to nurture and use that nurturing energy that you have and use that mothering part of you than to help other people at a place where there was no other voice. Like, you literally found a need and filled it. And that is, if that's not nurturing and mothering, like this world and people with infertility, I just don't know what is. So each one of you on this panel, I mean, when I went through my own journey, I would say that we came to the end of it like 2013, 2014 is where I started finding resolve, and literally finding resolve in 2016. Because I made these couple videos after I was a little bit further away from the end of the journey, because I would not have been able to function in the middle of it. But I was dark for a long time. And I spent a long time, I say, like, Google search and cry in the middle of the night, you know? And I found so many blogs and so many stories about women's journeys specifically, but they all ended with like their holiday card. And I didn't find you ladies. And oh man, would that have been so helpful to me to find, and I didn't find resolve yet. And I didn't find this community of people who were saying, like, you're gonna be okay, like, you're gonna be all right. And I felt so isolated. And so again, I'm gonna say this 18 more times, I'm thankful for this group of women. I'm thankful to be here. And I'm so proud to be in this little 4-box quadrant with you chatting virtually right now, because I think this work is incredible. Okay, so I'm gonna ask a question to each one of you based on the work that you do, but then it's gonna be a sort of open conversation if anybody else wants to add. I'm gonna start with Justine. So your website's amazing, lots of books, lots of incredible speaking. You also sell merch. So you have a shirt that I love this. It says, "Your perception of my story does not change my truth." Incredible. Can you speak a little bit, and then maybe each one of you ladies, can you speak a little bit to how you deal with other people's perception and how you move forward through that? And do you care still? Do you not care? When and where did people's perception of you sort of coming out as a person without children? Like, can you explain that journey to me a little bit, please?
Well, I think, so I never miss an opportunity to teach this piece. Like, there's a difference between caring about what people think and being defined by what people think. I care very much about what people think about me and about my work, because if I didn't care, I would have no capacity to connect with them. And without connection, we cannot heal and grow and move forward. I will not be defined by what you think of me, because then I lose all of my courage to show up as my full self. And so, like, that's the difference. Your perception of my story does not change my truth. Doesn't mean that I don't care about your perception. I want us to live from this curiosity of, like, what if we stayed curious about one another's perceptions, about one another's lived experiences? Because let's be honest, those of us who have ended the journey without children, without the hoped for, prayed for, and paid for result of babies, we are considered the sad, tragic, worst case scenario. Why is it difficult to find our stories? Because of that perception. Because we're not sharing enough of that this is a real ending. I know it's not the ending that any of us wanted, and you can reclaim it. I love my life. I love it. I've worked hard for it. I've healed a lot of parts from this journey. I've had to work through anger and bitterness. And there are days that it's there. It never goes away because it's grief. It's a lifelong journey. It doesn't get better. It gets different. And so, like, I want to get curious about how come you call my story sad and tragic and hard? Because I don't anymore. And when I finally did that, when I finally healed that part, when I stopped calling my story hard and tragic, I called it a big story. That's when I was able to turn it around and start serving the world with it and walking in my truth, like my motherhood and what that looks like. And there's not enough of that being shared within the community, especially within the community that's in treatments and struggling. Like they're not hearing our stories. And so their perception is that we're sad and tragic, and it's not true.
And it isn't. And with that, I think I'm gonna go to Jobi for a second, because one of the things that your website is, and thank you, Justine, because I think it's all, you speak with such passion because there's such truth and importance to what you're saying. So thank you for bringing that to this conversation. And Jobi, I'm gonna pivot to you, because that is what you talk about. You talk about like living an inspired life and helping people find their inspired life. So what does that look like to you? Because clearly you're doing that for others through your work.
Yeah. So every time I say something, it's a hashtag owning our voice. And that's very important, because I know there are millions out there that we don't even know about because they're living in silence and shame still. And so my goal in this mission is to have as many women to break their silence, which I have been able to, fortunately, and to own their voice and control their narrative. For too long, the narrative has been that infertility ended in a miracle child. But we know that 1 in 5 women will remain childless, and for 90% of them, it was not by choice. So that narrative can't be true, right? So we need to get visible. And what silence does is further perpetuates the stigma attached to childlessness. So it's up to us for the generations to come to speak up and control our narrative, because if we don't tell our story, someone else will.
There's just so much truth to that. And I think what's interesting is about, we've had this conversation already at the top about how we define things. And I think of your hashtags being childless. I actually think for the work that you do, it's the important way in to understand what you do and then reclaim that story once you get in there, and help people to find their joy is just amazing. I know I've written so many notes about you. You talk a lot about also the importance of personal coping strategies for involuntarily childless women. Can you give us maybe 1 or 2 coping strategies that you help with, like maybe how to help people own their voice or claim their voice?
Well, you don't have to go as just speaking on, in a video series like this. You can start off just journaling, writing about what you've experienced. That's how I started. And it's very cathartic, because you're writing about sometimes decades of a life that you really kind of put on hold for the pursuit of motherhood, and not realizing that I can't have children. Now what? So you're now at that stage, and you're trying to figure out, how can you cope and live beyond it. And I talk to women in every stage, just realizing they can't have children, to have for decades of just been living a fulfilled life. But, so you just have to meet yourself where you are. Don't compare yourself where someone else is in their story, and just take it one day at a time. You may not think that you can, but I tell you, whatever stage you're in, your story will be someone else's survival guide, wherever stage you're in.
Your story will be someone else's survival guide. Now you should put that on a t-shirt. That's in a really, maybe you already do. That's really important. It's really important. And again, I think it's important too, that what you're saying is that, Jobi, it's not everybody needs to like make videos and be on a platform and blog, and because that's not everybody's way. That's not everybody's personality. But this idea of like journaling your own story and sharing your own story, even if just for you, getting those words out will help take some of the power of the pain away, is like just such valuable advice. Thank you.
What I did initially when I wrote a blog, I actually used that as an opportunity to have my family and friends to read it. Instead of just repeating the story so many times, I just wrote it down. And if they had questions after that, then they came to me. And I think that's a much better than continually repeating the same story. Although some of them may have been a part of that journey with you, but no one knew the entire story, you know? So I think that's a good place to start, because when someone writes a blog or gets interviewed on my website, or I interview them, that they always send their family and friends to understand them a little better.
Absolutely. And what I've actually found through some of my work, and I'm certain through some of all of yours as well, is that sometimes people will use our work to say, hey, this is how I feel. I don't have the words to share right now, but this is, I mean, when I made this like first video, it was just called, it was like an infertility coming out party. And it's like silly, but it's also sad, but it's also pretty real.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
And it was a way to say, this is what you don't know about me that I'm going through. And so I don't have to tell the story 1,000 times. And so you can understand it without me saying, here's what I'm going through. Here's what I'm doing. Here's what happened. Here's where, you know, but what happened was I know many of you got emails that were, I never knew how my wife felt until I watched your video, or I used my video to help people understand how I feel. It's making me a little emotional. Like that was powerful, that us sharing our stories and writing the books and having the podcast and the incredible work that you do is really serving other people and nurturing and mothering other people through our work. And for all of you, and for those of you who are listening that need this work, we're grateful. Okay, Katy. Now, pleasure anarchist.
Yes.
Okay. One of the things that isn't discussed, because again, there is, I don't know why, but sexuality is hard to talk about. Sex is hard to talk about. There's shame of infertility. There's shame of sexuality, whether that's right or wrong. Those are things that sort of cloud around us a lot. And so even by talking about infertility, you're talking about your sex life, right? Like you're talking about, even when you're asking somebody, oh, you guys trying? Like, you know, which we know how we all feel about that. But that's still, you're asking somebody about their sex life also.
Yeah.
But one of the things that you talked about at the top and the importance of your work is oftentimes it's not talked about our connection to our infertility, and especially depending on where our journey goes, and if it doesn't end the way we want, how that makes us feel as sexual beings, and how we can feel broken, or how that makes our sex life sort of for a while maybe mean something else and become something else. And it sort of colors the pleasure of sex. I mean, I'm just gonna say it.
Sure.
So can you talk please a little bit about your work and the importance of what you're doing?
Yeah, so, and I have so many thoughts too on Justine and Jobi's.
All of it. I want all of it.
Okay. Well, first I just want to say too that I think that so much of sort of coming out as you know, I dealt with infertility and I don't have children is because, and the shame that surrounds that, and tied up in my work I do in sexuality, is that so much of society's value of women is really based on motherhood. And, you know, right or wrong, that's whether you got that message directly or indirectly, it's just how it is. And I think that's why it's so jarring to when you say, okay, well, I'm not going to have children. You know, I tried whatever, or even just child free, you know, where it doesn't acknowledge infertility perhaps, but why that's so jarring for people. And it's like, oh, well, I'm so sorry, you know, like, oh, well, you know, that must be the only thing that you have going for you. And now that you can't do that, oh my God, what are you going to do? You know? And for me, it's always been like, well, you know, yes, I did want to be a mother. I really did. But also before I wanted to be a mother, before I had that idea of maybe this is a thing I'd like to do, I had a lot of other things that I wanted to do. You know, I had a lot of other curiosities and drives and passions. And so it was more about just remembering those things, that just because I can't do this one thing, doesn't define my whole life going forward. And it was a really hard time, right? But but I was so much more than my ability to be a mother before I experienced infertility, and I still am. So, and also like, I didn't even know about the childless after infertility community until I started the Pleasure Anarchist, which is wild to me because, and I think that's so much of like, you know, the visibility of this community and the shame that's associated because there isn't visibility. It's like, I didn't even know there was a space for me. It was like, after I left and stopped trying to have a baby, it was like, okay, well, you're just on your own now, you know? So I sort of see this community as we're trying to gather all the people back in and go, we see you, and there is a community for you. So if you decide that, you know, you want to stop infertility treatments or you want to live without children, like there is this community for you. So that's what I have to say to you lovely ladies. And also, so Pleasure Anarchist, yes, the work that I do. I think that when we, our perceptions of like the function of sex and sexuality when we're trying to conceive, it just becomes so focused on this end goal, right? And we lose sight, we can very easily lose sight of the connection that it can provide to our partners, to ourselves, like the pleasure that we can derive from it. And it's not just, you know, for the purpose of conception. And our perception of sex is often taken in such a medicalized way that it can really like fracture the relationship and the trust that we have with our bodies. So I see the connection of infertility and sexuality. Yes, there is a physiological component, but also like I see it so much more as like a psychosocial issue that is just surrounding sex, like what infertility does to us psychosocially and how that relates to how we show up in our bodies with our partners. And of course, all that stuff impacts our sexuality and the way we connect. Like if we have poor body image, or if we think, oh, my sexuality is just for this purpose, you know, or sex is just for this purpose, and then what's the point, you know? And I think that in that way, I try and invite, you know, people to not only reclaim, but really like reinvent what sex means for them and what they want from it. And I think in that way, it can be a really powerful tool because there's just not many opportunities where you have these like times where you can go, okay, I need to reevaluate this, or I need to look at this, you know, and this is something that's, you know, perhaps not going well in my sex life. So what does that mean going forward? And I think infertility can really provide that, you know, that reflection of going, what do I want, you know, and what does sex mean to me? And it's not just about like baby making, penis and vagina, you know, gotta perform. It's so much more than that. And it's so much richer and more vast than just this like biological process. And so it can be really a really powerful thing to think about that.
You know,
But see,
go.
I was gonna say, but see, that's embedded in our mind from childhood. You know, first comes love, then comes marriage, then comes baby
Right,
care.
there you go.
Sure.
Yeah, so
Totally.
we're literally taught that from the, you know, the crib. So we don't even think that it's a possibility, and no one talks about it. You know, I even wrote something about how the church has failed us. You know, because it's just so taboo. And I did research from BC. I went all the way back to BC time because I am a researcher, and it's been here from the beginning of time. We shouldn't be marginalized, and it shouldn't be a stigma still, you know? So that's why it's very important for series like this to continually have a conversation about it and to bring a voice to it, because it should not be a taboo subject anymore.
Yeah, and like even like the language that we talk about, a child free or childless or whatever, it's like it's just so naturally assumed that when you meet another woman, one of the first things that you ask her is, do you have children? And really it's like, okay, I mean, when I meet people, I don't say, oh, I'm childless or I'm child free after infertility. I just say, oh, I don't have kids. I don't have kids. And sometimes I say, we don't have kids. We tried, but it didn't happen, you know? And it's not like I don't have to put a label on it, but just the fact that it's a given that conversation will come up because we're women speaks to how ingrained it is in society and in our culture. And I mean, it just has always been that, you know, women are mothers. And if you're not a mother, that means something. And it means something different for everybody, but that means something. And so, yeah, it's just like, I'm just me, you know, I'm just a badass woman. I'm not, and I don't have kids, I have cats.
And when I was growing up, I had the childless, a couple of childless aunts, and I always heard whispers when they weren't around of why they were childless. There was never a conversation when they were around, and I never asked them, even though I was an inquisitive child, I just never asked them. I wish I would have, but when I became the childless aunt, I knew that I did not want chatters. I wanted, when I'm gone from this earth, for the generations, but to know why Auntie Jobi was childless.
Right.
So I felt like I had to break that, whatever generational curse or whatever you call it, to stop the chatters and know it's okay to talk about, and you don't have to whisper when someone's not around, and it could be an open discussion. So I really try to work hard to do that. And now my family is having conversations about it. So I think that's a good thing. Even the children, yeah.
Such a great thing. What a service you are doing. What are you providing to your family? And like you said, the next generation. I tried very hard to do the same with my nieces and nephews. They're now like middle school and early high school, and to have conversations like, yeah, I wanted kids and it didn't happen, but like, this is me thriving in my life. And I love to be an extra special. They call me Aunt Honey. Aunt Honey, I'm from Buffalo. Oh, they call me Aunt Honey. But you know, I try to show them that we all nurture in different ways and we all have different lives, and that the same way, it's not about being heterosexual is a default. Same way, neither being as mother a default. Like, I think we're trying to change a lot of language as we grow in society. And it's not about, do you have a boyfriend? Do you have a girlfriend? Do you have kids? Do you, like, you know, we're huge people with vast lives. And like, I love what you're all saying about like staying curious. Can we stay curious about our lives, about our sexuality, about what nurturing means, about what relationships to people mean, and us all being visible? And oh man, it's so good. Man, I said, it's so good. So here's the thing. I know we're getting close to our time, but I knew that I was like, I'm just going to want to talk to you all for so long. And I feel like people watching, that if you click this link, that you're here for a reason, and know that there are resources on all of these women's websites that are phenomenal. And of course, Resolve. And I'll get to the official wrap in a minute, but first I want a final word from each of you. So Katy, on your Instagram, you had a thing I saw that was going around that was really cool, but it said, you know, you don't have to be feminine to have value as a woman. You don't have to be a mother to have value as a woman. And it was, how do you mother yourself? And so I would like each one of you to please just tell me how you mother yourself, how you advocate for yourself in self-care, as a beautiful human being and woman in this world who is adding so much value to this planet. How do you take care of you? And whoever wants to go first.
How do you mother yourself? Yeah, I think that, well, one of the things so every year I pick a word, and I sort of reflect on it every month through various creative prompts. And the theme of this year for myself is self-compassion. And boy, that's a hard one. That's a hard one. It's very easy for me to have compassion for other people, but when it comes to myself, it's difficult. And I think that's definitely part of that self-mothering, is talking to yourself, how you talk to your friends and support yourself, how you talk to, or how you support your friends. And yeah, so what that looks like for me is a lot of just being aware of my internal self-talk and lots of baths. Self-care.
Love it.
Lots of baths. That's not a mothering thing, but that's a self-care
That's
thing.
yourself. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
What to piggyback off of what Justine even said earlier about the shaming, what you've gone through versus what somebody else gone through. The mothering for myself is no longer suppressing my hidden trauma by persuading myself that what I've experienced doesn't measure up against greater tragedies. And that was very hard to do because I've never been pregnant. I've never been able to conceive. So, and then even other, you know, tangible diseases that's out there, you know, that's, you know, people give grief, you know, accept your grief. But this is a disenfranchised grief. That's an invisible loss. And I had to allow myself to realize that, no, your grief is just as valid as anyone else's. So I allow myself to feel this grief. I validate that grief and I honor that grief because it's no different than any other intangible loss that you experience. So as far as mothering, I literally mother my nieces and nephews. I am the cool aunt. And even the children in the community, you know, I am the mother of them as well. So I guess that my mission in life was also to be a mother to many, and also just to be able to create a community with Tutum Global, to be able to allow so many women who have never spoken ever publicly to break their silence. And that's a mothering trait as well. And as far as mothering myself, I also take up hobbies. You know, I do photography, which is a very expensive hobby. And I just put myself at peace, you know. Sometimes I just take a break. I take a social media break. I just, you know, take a technology break. And I just cook, you know, or just sit on the porch and just, and it's not sometimes about what you're grateful for. Sometimes you could just ask yourself, what makes you smile? And that's not as much pressure as what am I grateful for? So I just think of things that makes me smile and focus on that.
Well, I am grateful for you and you're making me smile. Thank you. Justine.
I love that question. I think the biggest thing, and I teach this every day, we can't give what we don't have. So love, compassion, grace, generosity, forgiveness. You don't have it for yourself, give it to yourself, practice it for yourself. You don't stand a chance of serving the world well with any of it. And so one of my biggest things for my own healing journey and just, I guess, mothering myself is that extension of that grace and curiosity to be too much, to be all of who I am. Not unapologetically in a way that steps on other people, but unapologetically in regards that I deserve to take up space and have a voice and speak my truth. That's the difference. And so I do that because I think mothering means getting down on a child's level and looking in their eyes and saying, you're okay here. Tell me what it's like to live your life, right? And like, if we did that for ourselves, we'd be a lot less wounded, I think. And so, and when I can model it for the community, that's my strongest tool.
I don't know if you all see that, like, I'm going to have to go to the chiropractor after this because I've just, this whole time I've just been head nodding over and over and over because this conversation has just been so brilliant and so necessary. Jobi and Justine and Katy, I'm grateful that you would spend this time with us and to Resolve for allowing this conversation, which is critical and really, really important. And I hope that we continue them and have more. For those of you that are new to Resolve, we invite you to check out the website, which is resolve.org. And of course, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And if this conversation is helpful to you or someone that you love, you can support the mission through a donation at resolve.org. And that helps people to have these conversations, and also through a ton of advocacy work that Resolve does throughout the year. Thank you to Granada Bio for the sponsorship. You ladies, I am in awe and inspired, and I'm just gonna cry so many tears of joy that we got to have this conversation. I think it's just been so fulfilling to my heart and to my soul. And for those of you who are watching this, who might be struggling right now, know that you are supported, that you are loved, and that you are not alone. We care about you and we love you so much. We'll see you again. Thank you all so much for watching. We really appreciate it.